And we're live. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Arts, Parts, and Points, an exchange of Masonic education and ideas. This is our first episode, and we're very excited to do this. At this time, I guess we should all introduce ourselves, and then we're going to get into why we are doing this podcast. My name is Ryan Flynn. I'm a past master of Ancient York Lodge, number 89. Up in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm also an honorary member of a few lodges down in North Carolina and one in Rhode Island. Gentlemen. Brian?
Oh. Hi, my name's Brian Simmons. I'm a member of Ezekiel Bates Lodge. I'm down here in Attleboro, Massachusetts.
I'm Mike Jarzabek. I'm a member of Brigham Lodge in Ludlow, Massachusetts, Ezekiel Bates, and several others.
Very cool. So yeah, everyone, we're very excited about doing this. The reason why we decided to put this podcast together is each one of us has influenced our lodges in one way or another and brought things to Masonry which we thought were lacking. This has been quite an experience for each one of us, and we've gone through some highs and some lows. And we thought that sharing this type of experience with people would be beneficial to the craft. So we're looking forward to talking to you about all this stuff. We're also looking forward to you guys asking us questions and adding to the conversation. So I guess I'll lead the conversation here first and ask around the room, what do you think the purpose of this podcast is going to be in your own words? We'll start with Brian. What made you want to join this?
Well, I think that we've had so many discussions together, various places that we've been over the past 5 years that a lot of people would actually get a significant amount of information from them, plus also add to it. I think that we definitely go down some different rabbit holes and different techniques on dealing with the conflicts and issues that we actually run into in Lodge, and not just complaining about the problem, so to speak, but actually coming up with things that we've done that worked, didn't work, and that's been very beneficial, and I think that we'll be able to push that forward and help other lodges and people get to know, some other avenues of approach, from conflict resolution to crisis. There's a lot of stuff that you don't really think about as masters, how to console a widow when, a brother dies. Like, you never prepared for that stuff, but there's ways to do it and learn from it. So I'm looking at digging deeper into actual solutions rather than discussing problems.
Right. That's what I'm looking forward to here as well. As being a past master and with my lodge, I know my experience is something that is not particularly unique, but everybody likes to walk into their role as master and running the lodge and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's going to be great, everybody's going to be happy. And then there's a significant amount of stuff that you just have to deal with that you were not preparing for. So I guess my camera just turned off. Someone do that to me? Anyway, I reached out to, I'm sorry, guys, there we go. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, there's a lot of things that happen in your lodge that you're not prepared for. And you have to rely on your Masonic knowledge. You have to rely on your knowledge of the Constitution and the bylaws of your lodge to kind of get through things. And sometimes you have to make some hard decisions, and hopefully you guys have the support to get through it. But a great thing I'm looking forward to about this is each one of us has gone through that, and I think all of us have come out ahead. And it's exactly like you said. We were having conversations after lodge, even last night, when we're talking about things that are going to benefit other people if they were with us. And they weren't, obviously. But this is a great opportunity to share, because I know I can learn a lot from you guys, and maybe you guys can learn something from me, and everybody watching kind of gain a little Masonic knowledge going forward. So, what about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think for all those reasons, and I enjoy talking to both of you guys, and I respect your opinions on things. So I think that other people would find some benefit to the diversity of opinion that we have between us. And like you said, hopefully the conversation's helpful to not just the masters, but maybe the younger guys coming up behind them that maybe don't think that they can be a master, and they don't. I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty nervous when I came through. I mean, I was coming up the line so fast that I actually stepped out for a year, and some people would probably think that was the end of your quote unquote Masonic career, but it wasn't. Here I am, still around, because it was too fast, and there unfortunately are a lot of people that are in that position and get put in that position throughout the country that are asked to run lodges before they even understand what the fraternity is all about. Yeah. And I think that due to the amount that we've all traveled, we have a pretty good perspective on what exactly it takes to run a lodge, and across different states, not just in one state, but multiple jurisdictions.
That actually brings up the conversation we were having last night, which is probably something we can allude to right now. Each one of our lodges, as far as I know, is something that uses a progressive line. And there are benefits to the progressive line, and there are also hindrances that it can create. What are your guys' thoughts on using a progressive line in lodge? I mean, the ideal situation is everybody gets a year or 2 years in each chair and moves up. But we all know that there are some things that happen in lodge that make certain members not ready to go up to the next chair, or maybe they're not ready, or maybe they're not the right person. And having a strict progressive line, that little hiccup can really put a wrench in everybody's lodges. And it's something I think everybody who's listening to this can kind of say, yeah, I've seen that happen before. So I'll start with you, Brian. What are your thoughts? Like progressive line, does it more beneficial, or does it cause more problems, do you think?
I think it's beneficial on paper. I mean, it looks amazing. You got your line, everyone's going to go up in a certain order. But whether the brother's doing good in line, or something happens, moves away, or has to drop out of line because of X, Y, Z, doesn't matter. I mean, it's always going to be jumbled. And at the same time, you see brothers hit their stride at different points of their Masonic careers. So I think you have to take that into consideration, that a brother that's in full stride is going to do more for your lodge by moving up faster than somebody that's just not ready. I don't know that, Mike. Stop touching stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like you're scratching up there the records.
Yeah. But I've seen it both ways. I've seen progressive line work, but you almost get a sense of entitlement by being in a progressive line, where I've done my time, I earned this, and that's not how Masonry should be. I just don't. I haven't seen it work that way successfully. You have good brothers, or you get the brother that, this is my spot. I'm the permanent junior deacon. Like, that's ridiculous. So I would say, no, I'm completely against progressive lines. I think they're great if it would ever work, but it's why worry about trying to make it work when it's probably never gonna.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, you kind of mentioned it, that I've seen is, you'll have a line, and you'll have someone who's really good at one part. Like I've seen a lodge where, the guy who does the middle chamber lecture is just stellar at it. and he owns that part. He understands it, and he moves up, and the guy behind him is nowhere close to what that person can be. And yeah, there's that cost analysis to it where you're just thinking like, all right, should we keep the other guy back in it so that we give a good degree, or do we move him up so that this other guy can experience that at the expense of the candidate's degree? It's a kind of a fine line. I don't think there's really a right answer to it. Mike, what do you think?
So I guess this will probably be our first disagreement, but I kind of think the progressive line's one of the most important parts of the structure of a lodge. And the reason is the lodge being a microcosm of the world, the progressive line's a part of that. Like, when I'm sure we've all had jobs where maybe our boss isn't the easiest person to get along with, isn't the most effective leader, but we all have to learn how to deal with them. And this gives us a safe environment in which to learn those things. So when you have an effective master, it may make for a very ineffective lodge, but is having an effective lodge the point of this whole exercise? I don't really think it is. I think
Chris joined. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, sent the wrong link to someone.
If Freemasonry in general was intended to make strong lodges, you could argue there's some nice crumbs on that keyboard. You could argue that the structure of Freemasonry, the way it is, letting amateurs in Massachusetts case, 250 different lodges or locations run an organization, sometimes with quite a bit of money in its coffers, is probably the most reckless and insane thing you would ever do if you wanted to make it run effectively. So the question I ask myself is, why do we still do that after 300 years? That there's got to be a point to it all. And I think that the progressive line is part of that. That I think the people that don't go through the line and they miss a huge opportunity for development and for growth as an individual.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to think about with progressive lines is I'm personally on the fence with them. In theory, they work great, and when you're doing your ritual, if you go through ritual, and I don't want to use the term esoteric mindset, but from a symbolic mindset, when you're actually starting to learn about your degrees and learning what each part symbolizes and what this gate means and what that gate means, and you focus on learning about masonry in each chair that you go up, going through the chairs in order is a highly rewarding experience. But that being said, the days of having 300 members in a lodge and your officers, which are 12 if you have stewards around there, that being the top 7% of your lodge, the 7 most interactive, most highly motivated brothers are your officers. It's just not that case anymore. And in some lodges, it's 60% of your active brothers. So the juggling around is problematic, and I think we all can kind of agree on it. But if done correctly, I think progressive lines is the way to go. But what that does is highly motivate. Hi, Chris. Highly motivate each one of us to support each other as we go through our Masonic journeys. Like if someone is going through a chair and they're struggling with it, it's the responsibility of all the other officers of the lodge to bring that brother up and help him through that process. That's kind of the goal.
I agree with that. I think, in the cases where you guys have seen a progressive line fail, what does the lodge have for a support system or for training and development of their officers? Is it 100% the guy's fault when he fails?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I love the concept of the progressive line and the journey itself, but again, I mean, how many people are bad at ritual, and how many great ritual people are horrible at leadership? The best ritualist in the world, if he can't lead, the lodge is doomed. So it's a mute point, and you're not going to have a 12-year line anymore. It's so rare. Most lodges can't even field a full line to begin with. You're looking at the average time for a master in Massachusetts is 5 years from being raised. I mean, what are you going to do? Nobody's going through the full progressive line. Should they? Yes. But I mean, it's not feasible under the circumstances that we have currently in the craft. So I think that you have to capitalize on your superstars and move them up to the point that you have leadership, and then let the super rock star ritualists take over the ritual portion of it. I mean, it's not the ideal situation, but you have to have a functioning something come out of this.
Yeah, I agree. But I think in my mind, because let's face it, the situation is what we have. I mean, we're never going to have lodges where we have 160 members on the side and, the scholars of the Masonic world are your officers. It's just not going to happen. So I think that by going into the line, especially when a master appoints someone, the emphasis should be put on that appointment, saying you are now part of a team and you're the new guy, and we understand that. We're going to be here for you. But to be equally responsible, these guys need to be there to support their master and support their wardens and support everybody else, so that everybody is got each other's back on a level where the lodge can see that and really see that brotherly love. That's, in my mind, is the answer, because as we consider ourselves semi-success stories with Masonry. I mean, we've all kind of accomplished something when we put our minds to it, but I'm pretty much going to guarantee that none of us here can say we did it alone. We had people backing us up and supporting us, and that's the key to all of this, I think. Mike, what do you think?
No, I think that's absolutely true. And I also think the progressive line. So, Brian, you made the point that we don't have the opportunity to have that many officers, but what part do we get rid of? Because different parts of the line mean different things to different guys. To a guy that's super confident, overconfident, making him do a steward's job is probably the most development that he can get out of the line. Someone like myself, that when I went through the line, I was scared to make a decision. I probably couldn't have made dinner for a family of 4, and I was put in positions where I had to make decisions. And I asked one of the past masters, and Brian knows the story. I asked one of the past masters one night, what he thought about a decision I was going to make, and he said, "You know what I want to know, kid? I want to know when you're going to run the freaking lodge." And that was all I really needed. After that, I was like, okay, I don't need permission for anything else. So for me, that I needed the development of the master and the warden's chairs, but other guys maybe need the other chairs where they have to sit back and let somebody else run things. Because maybe in their life and their career, they're the top dog in everything they do. And so for them to take a back seat and listen to a 23-year-old kid that's in charge of a lodge is instructive in its own way to them. So I think it's part of the journey. I think it's as important as the ritual. And even the ritual itself, I mean, you can be a great ritualist, but to me, learning the ritual, for us, the jurisdictions that don't require you to memorize the ritual, you're not doing that psychological process of internalizing the ritual and really so that it can work in your mind and ferment other ideas. So I think there's a lot of reasons to have the progressive line that have nothing to do with having an effective lodge. I mean, you could argue that most of the lodges that the 3 of us would feel were effective are coloring well outside the lines of what their lodge is actually chartered to do. A lodge is usually there to make Masons, to raise money to support the brothers in times of need, and I think that's probably about it. I think there might be one more thing, but what we expect out of a lodge is more than it was ever really designed to be in the first place.
Expand on that. What do you think a lodge was originally designed to do? I'd love to hear your point on that.
Well, if you read the charters that are in Massachusetts anyway, it's uh, a lodge is designed to make masons, to uh, have to support those masons, to raise money to support the masons, so that in times of need, so there's to have charity funds. And I think, Brian, there's one more. Do you remember what it is?
I do not.
No. So there's one more thing, but that's the original design of what a lodge was. I mean, when you go back to, at least in the United States, when you go back to the early Massachusetts lodges, they met like once a year, twice a year, and it was totally different than what we're doing now. I mean, a lot of what we do now is based on what they were doing in the 1850s and the 1920s when they really had the two big booms.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of begs the question, if we have all these Masonic writings and Masonic, teachings that we reference in our educational programs and stuff, and we don't see that in the minutes of our lodges, does that mean it wasn't happening, or does that mean it wasn't happening in a lodge? Which is, I think all three of us can agree that, the greatest Masonry doesn't happen in a lodge. Some of the most monumental moments of my Masonic career have happened on the streets of, outside of a lodge at 2:30 in the morning, having a really deep conversation, or scotch and cigars at a cigar bar. And that's where some of the most deep conversations and real introspective parts of Masonry have happened for me. So does that fall on a responsibility of the lodge, or does it fall on the responsibility of a Mason? That's a loaded question right there. What do you think, Brian?
I think it is a loaded question. As we know, I mean, every lodge has its own culture and environment that you have to cater to. You can change the culture of a lodge, but how much is really the question. So to some lodges, it is just meeting once in a while, but they go out to dinner, there's a lot of stuff in our records where brothers and their wives all went out to dinner, every month or whatever. But it's not what we need now as far as my lodge. It's, and a lot of the younger lodges coming up is that they want so much more, your what you can't really describe Freemasonry. I think that's one of the things, and it's just that it's the deep connections that you actually make with another person. That only happens through Masonry, because they're people that you're not going to meet. How am I going to know some art guy up in New Hampshire, without Freemasonry? And the same thing goes for Mike. Like I wouldn't go to Ludlow. I don't have any purpose to. But the conversations and the relationships you make in that, and it goes the other way, because when you have a brother in need, like emotionally or whatever, it's, you feel that pain. When a brother's going through something, it's a family, and you can't pick your family. So this is how you choose your family, is how I see it. Yeah. So I think it's, you have to adapt to the culture of the lodge. That's why I tell people when they're looking for a lodge, you got to check out the personalities and see what it is. Is it a fraternal lodge? Because if they're just going to do fraternal stuff and you want charity, then that's not the right place. But you need components of all three to really meld together and be what I consider Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm. I think Freemasonry is a term that no one's ever going to agree on. Personally, from my experiences, I consider Masonry nothing more than a spiritual journey, and the reason I say that is I was once fortunate enough to be harshly questioned by a scholar brother, and his question line was, so what makes Masonry special? Why is Masonry so great? And I said, oh, it's a great brotherhood. Yeah, there's literally thousands of brotherhoods in this country. So next. Okay, well, we accept all faiths and, we treat each other as equals. Yeah, that's pretty much the mantra of all of them, with the exceptions of ones that are religiously inclusive. Okay, well, it's worldwide and, there's a connection that you'll never be able to meet. Well, I was in the military. We met that. We have a stronger brotherhood than you guys ever will. Okay, so what makes this special? And it was a really, really awkward questioning because I couldn't come up with an answer. And if there's a few brothers I would like to do those questions too, just to see what they come up with, because at the end of the road, what makes Masonry so unique? I mean, for me, I can't say it's the charity, because there's charitable organizations out there that do a lot of charity. I can't say it's like the social interactions with your community, because there's organizations like Rotary Club that all they do is community. But it's that amazing connection that Masonry takes from all of this. It takes the social responsibilities. It takes the charitable responsibilities for your brothers. And it takes this hodgepodge of all these other things that you're asked to do. You're asked to be studious. You're asked to be industrial. You're asked to do all of these things. And at the end of it, you have a ritual that says the reason you're doing this is because it's going to connect you to God better, which I think is the unique part of Masonry. So when people ask me for my definition, I say Masonry is there to support a lifestyle that benefits you, your brothers, your neighborhood, and your relationship with God. And the beauty about that is I have a very different way of connecting with God than someone down the road. And to me, I love to create, and I get a spiritual high sometimes when I'm doing this. Other people going out and doing grunt work for brothers or strangers, that's how they connect with their God. That's how they serve their God. Others, it's just being there for your brothers. Some people love to teach. Some people love to learn. It's all this great hodgepodge of Masonry. And I think Masonry is, in particular, its ritual is worded in a way where you get a really good push in the right direction, but that direction is very wide and you can take it any way you want. And I think that's what makes Masonry a little bit greater than everything that's out there, because it really is an introspective journey. Mike, your reaction to all this? We're going all over the place today.
Yeah, I think that it is really hard to define. And I remember when I first came in the fraternity, and after the third degree, I was like, all right, what's next? What do you guys do? Well, we meet and we make other Masons, and I'm like, all right, I'm bored already. I'm looking for something more. That's it. You explained to me what everything meant. So I think the first reaction that most guys have when you watch, I've had the benefit now of watching several masters come up behind me and watching the development from a younger age, as I'm sure you guys have too. You see them come up from the beginning and come to be master, and their maturation as a Mason. And you'll usually see them in the beginning, they'll be like, I know what everything's about. And usually it's going to be about charity or history right off the bat, because those are two easy, accessible things, right? And so what they'll usually do is say something like, I really like bowling. You know what we really need in the lodge? A bowling league, because that's something I understand. So if I can make Masonry into something I can understand, I don't really have to do the hard work of understanding what it is and mastering it. And you talked about that in your talk last night about how you really have to apply yourself, and that you have to apply the right amount of force in that spiritual journey. And when it gets tough, when you think like, I'm bored by this, and you don't look into the ritual and you don't look into the history and the allegories and the deep, numberless rabbit holes that you can go down, which some of which are probably just there to trip us up. I mean, you ever get the feeling that you're like researching the symbol for the 50th time and you're like, why don't I just apply it already? Like I've learned every other reason about it. But I think all the other things tend to be a little bit of a distraction. And I'm not saying we should get rid of them, because I think there needs to be, everybody's going to come to it in their own time, in their own way. So I might not be ready to learn, uh, why there's Shakespeare in a certain part of the degree. I might not be able to understand that right now. I might not be ready for it. I may never be ready for it. But there might be things that I'm ready to do that are more physical, like cooking a dinner for some brothers, or going to a hospital to visit somebody, or going to a funeral, or learning about the history. So I think there needs to be multiple points of entry, and that's why it's okay to expand out like this. All I'm saying is that I think we need to keep sight of the central purpose, and that is those 3 degrees have a lifetime of education in them. And we can look for all the other education we want, but it's already right there in front of us. I mean, we were talking last night, from the from the Renaissance to Shakespeare to, I mean, numberless Greek mythology and Greek philosophy. There's so much in those 3 degrees that you could never ever possibly learn it all, and if you did, you could never apply it all. So I think the lodge serves as a safe place for us to explore them, because if we don't apply them, they don't mean anything, right? They're just collected knowledge. They might as well just be in the in the safe repository or whatever, and just keep them in there, like like we keep some of our history. Let's just put that in a safe. It's too valuable. We can't let anybody see it, because it's too valuable. So we're going to lock it away for the next 100 years, and everybody's going to forget we have it, and they're going to throw it away sometime. And then Keith McKinnon hopefully will rescue it, and someone will appreciate it in the future. But that's kind of my take on why this is important.
So each one of us kind of said, that journey of learning what Masonry is, and the experience of going through the line and going through Masonry in our own personal journeys has helped define what we consider Masonry to be. As I'm someone who just came out of the East, and I asked this question a lot to myself, and brothers have asked me, with you guys going through the East and coming out, what do you think the most important lesson you guys learned as master was, and how it applies to what your views of Masonry are, what you just told us? Brian, you want to go?
Yeah. I would say that I sacrificed being right several times to keep harmony in the lodge. And I think that was at first a tougher pill to take than I thought it would be. Sometimes proving that you're right isn't as important as keeping the peace, so to speak. Without going into too much detail on situations, but essentially that was the big one, where it's actually, the harmony of the lodge is more important. And you really have to take yourself and look at the lodge as, no matter what, the lodge comes first when you take that vow. I know we always talk family first and everything, but once you accept the fact that all your members have to look to you, and you are the captain of the ship, there's a lot more sacrifice than people really look at. And I think that those are the 2 things that really caught me off guard, I think.
What about you, Mike?
So I think the biggest thing I learned was about myself. At the same time, I was taking a program that we had in the state called Masonic Leadership Institute, and they had one of these exercises where you were on one side of the building and you had 5 people and you had to get everybody to the other side of the building. And one guy was deaf, one guy was blind, one guy couldn't walk, and one guy couldn't talk. Well, I couldn't talk. And when the guy that couldn't walk, I was trying to communicate to people. I'm like, all right, let's just pick him up and carry him. And I couldn't communicate because I didn't have the faculty of speech. So I got so frustrated that I just picked the guy up and firemen's carried him and started running across the building. And we came in second. And I was so proud of myself that we came in second. And afterwards, they used to take video and pictures of this, and they would put it up afterwards at the end of the training for the weekend. They would show stuff of what happened. And I saw this picture of me with this guy, like firemen's carrying this guy and running. And the guy that couldn't see, in my mind, still to this day, was like Superman's cape, like flowing behind somebody else because somebody else was trying to run to keep up with me. And like that guy was like behind him, like, and if that guy didn't think to take the blind guy, I would have left half the team behind because I had a goal in front of me and I was going to do whatever it took to do that, no matter what anybody else on the team thought or whatever. It was just, I was very mission oriented. I just want to get it done and let's go. And, you know, it was very sobering to me to see that. And it was right around the same time as Master. And I did the same thing in the lodge. We had a successful year. In some ways, we did 17 different events. Walking into the year, we didn't know if we were going to do, I didn't really have a plan. And a district deputy sat next to me at a visit and said, "Hey, you should have a plan or a goal." So I was like, "All right, we're going to raise 10 grand, you know, in the community." So we did raise 10 grand in the community, but we did like 17 events. I burnt everybody out. You know, it was, again, I wasn't really paying attention to what anybody in the lodge wanted. I was just paying attention to, I set a goal without any input from anybody else. And by all means, it was successful. But to me, looking back on it, it was a disaster. And, you know, ritual wise, we were horrible. I mean, I did so bad at exemplification that they had to stop the exemplification because I didn't know any of the ritual because I didn't learn it ahead of time and I wasn't ready. So in a lot of ways, I didn't take care of all the details. I was so busy setting a goal and just losing sight of everything else. And I still struggle with that, but it was instructive to me, and I can recognize it more easily now, having served in the East. That gave me that chance to see how that worked. And interestingly enough, I mean, I think at the time with work, by the time I got to be master, I got promoted at work, and everything kind of went in a cycle. And so that growth, you could see it across the board.
Very cool. I think for me, it was. I learned what the power of support is, and I learned how detrimental not supporting someone is, and it immediately reminded me of times when I was that person not supporting someone, and the viewpoint of you don't know what someone else is going on. What's going on in someone else's life. You don't know the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, as we all know, there's certain things that like masters have to stay with the master. And the assumptions that what that person is doing is a negative thing or without giving him the due respect of a brother, you know, every time that I saw it happening, I immediately would think of the times that I did it. And it was kind of a really eye-opening experience for me. And I consider it probably one of the best lessons I've learned in Masonry, because now when I see different things happening outside of lodge, you know, I have a friend right now who they're going through a really difficult time with a family member being very sick. And, you know, it's, you know, all I say to this person is, you know, make sure your family members know that you're there for them. You know, don't start talking behind backs. Don't start assume that they're doing things for the right. You know, you trust this person, you love this person, be there for them. Just let them know. And it's remarkable to have someone in your life, whether it be a friend or a brother that you know was always there for you, and that's masonry on the whole. If some, I witness things once in a while where that's very not apparent, and it really is sad, because I've felt that way as a master, and then I know what it feels like to do that to someone when I wasn't master. And it was a really great. I mean, I look back as that's probably the biggest positive experience for me as master is learning that the hard way. um, and I look forward to making sure that Masons that I interact with or people that I interact with understand that kind of point of view. Like, always be there for someone. I'm really looking forward to how that outlook on life will affect me moving forward, because I've definitely noticed changes in my life because of it, where I walk into a situation and I see the negativity and I see the like the assumptions that someone is doing something wrong because they don't understand your brilliant strategy that's in your head, because after all, you know everything. And walking into something in a much more humble and supportive way, the results of that have been huge. It's a completely different way of living, and I don't think I would have been privy to that unless I had both the negative and positive side of doing that. If I didn't royally screw up for a year, and then deal with the repercussions of that the following year, then I never would have learned it. And we both have, all three of us have talked about this. You being in a position in Masonry at that time for a reason. Like, we're all here for a reason, and these lessons that we all learn are going to be presented to us when we're ready for them, and we have to be willing to pick up these lessons and go through it. So with lessons, I guess we can talk about what we want to do with this podcast. Or I know we're not calling it a podcast. We just want to have discussions that people can kind of relate with. What are your goals? What are some of the things that you'd like to discuss moving down the road, from your successes in lodges that you're hoping to help people learn from? Just throw a huge question at you, right?
Yeah, it's quite a good question there. I mean, I think, like anything, you can set our goals now as far as what we'd like to be able to put out, but it's going to evolve over time. We're not going to be able to say we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we might get to X and find out that people are really looking for D or whatever, and jumping around. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think that we can go down quite a few rabbit holes for a decent amount of time, just discussing everything, like symbolism in buildings and how it relates to the day and
art.
yeah, we'll probably skip art. The liberal sciences, and we can cover some of the history, and education should be a huge one, and not so much do education in your lodge, but let's explore ways that it can be done. What are the options out there? I know me and Mike are constantly fighting the myth that Grand Lodge is the enemy, and it's just, realistically, it's not. If you actually have a good relationship with the Grand Lodge, they're okay with almost anything. Like, we have free reign, so let's explore things that we can actually do to get education in lodges, and give the brothers that are coming in to become better, let them have the possibility to become better. I think that's really the gist of what I think that we should be looking for.
Well, you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, because one of our past Grand Masters, Most Worshipful Albert Ames, he said once at a presentation I was at, that the best thing a Grand Lodge can do is to tell you what you can't do. Because if they tell you what you can do, The only thing you'll ever do is exactly what they told you to do.
Yeah.
So that being said, we get a lot of negative things from Grand Lodge, right? Because they're always telling us where that line is when we cross it. And they, every time they tell you to do something, either you're not going to listen because they're Grand Lodge and I'm going to do exactly the opposite because I don't really want to do what they want us to do. But I think what we have the opportunity to do here, especially because of how much we've traveled and I mean, Brian especially, he's lived 20 years of masonry in like 5. So I think the realm of possibilities, not the no's, but okay, we already know what the no is, right? Your Grand Lodge told you what the no is, but what are some of the yeses? What are some of the possibilities? Because sometimes left with that wide open expanse of this is what is available, you don't know what the next step is. You talked about the first step last night. So I think we can have discussions about what might be a good first step for a lodge that's trying to improve themselves, and what might be the next step after that, and how that's looked for some lodges, and where it's failed and where it's succeeded.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, what I'm really looking forward to sharing with is each one of us in here has had a very distinct viewpoint of masonry, and our viewpoints have allowed us to, for some self-described improvements in our lodge or in masonry in general. I mean, I consider both of you guys innovators, and many people call me one as well. And I think as we've been talking about this whole time, there's no really right way to do it, but we've all experienced and witnessed ways that have worked. And talking about what we've seen in the positive, hey, this, I traveled here and they do it this way. It's really cool. I've traveled here and I've seen this and it's not very cool. But rarely do I hear Masonic discussions that are just about, how do you interact with people without, I don't want to say boring them, but there's this stigma about Masonic education where it's someone getting up and going, Preston wrote in this book, which alludes to Mackey or vice versa. I just pissed off a lot of academics right now. but there's this stigma about getting up there and just doing a book report. When in my mind, the key to understanding masonry is more of a contemplative approach. Like I would rather, I got this in art history school when they would say, like, I would rather you know what this painting is about than know what year the painting was painted in, or at least reach to try to figure this out. And that was great because I hated memorizing dates, but it also puts the emphasis on, like, yeah, it's really cool to know the sources in a lot of stuff. There's some scary words out there that people shy from when it comes to Masonic education. There's lodges that if I mention Kabbalah, the pitchforks and torches come out. But, we can talk about things that are Kabbalic in nature and without dumbing them down, just in different terminology, just more approachable. And if that brother really wants to get into it, we can point them towards that direction and kind of go down that rabbit hole with them. But just thinking about things like cause and effect, as above, so below, so below, in a manner of balance. Like, how do you balance your life? Where do you want to stay? How do you become spiritual and grounded at the same time? It's ways that I've been able to witness by traveling that really seem to have an impact on brothers, more so than the stigma of the Masonic educator getting up and reading a report. So I'm really looking forward to sharing what I've seen. I've been very fortunate enough to travel a lot with Masonry, and I've seen some really awesome things. And I'm hoping that this online discussion series, not a podcast, will help us kind of develop these ideas and see if we can get them into other lodges. So that being said, we're coming up on close to an hour. For our first series, I think we've done pretty good and kind of established where we are coming from and what we hope to do. Are there any closing remarks that you guys want to say before we leave?
Well, I would say that I think we kind of bounced around a little bit, maybe dabbling in deeper discussions down the road.
Yeah.
And I would also like to say that just because, we've had success, I think that that's another whole topic, is how to deal with success. It's our lodge did really good for the past 5 years, but the brothers coming in now, I mean, they don't know failure. So they just assume that this is how it is, and it's going to eventually form complacency, and it's going to be the actual ebb and flow. And now I'm seeing it from the other side and saying, oh, well, I mean, it's not really maintaining. It's success is not a finish line, and it's constantly pushing that finish line and giving reason. And that's another whole avenue to really start to explore. But it's going to be stuff like that I'm kind of excited about. We'll have to figure out how we're going to actually schedule our future shows and how often, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot of suggestions from people that listen to it as well, which is the whole point. So maybe we can get some education ourselves.
Yeah. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think we should invite the probably at this point 6 people that are listening to us, but hopefully
definitely Busby
later. Yeah, we should invite them to ask some questions. Maybe there's something that really struck them as as something they want to learn more about, and before we go off on a tangent on something that just interests us. I think if we have this as kind of an open discussion, if they want to ask some questions, I think we should invite them to do so, and put it on the Facebook page, put it on a YouTube page, and give us suggestions on what you'd like to ask us. I mean, right. I think that's something that could separate us from other podcasts in general, not just Masonic podcasts, but in general, where it's that open format of allowing people to be part of the discussion, not just listen to us talk.
Yeah. For me, it's actually almost the complete opposite of what Brian was saying. And I hope to learn from it as we do it. But from my point of view, one of the hardest things that I have to deal with, or what I see, is as a national speaker in Masonry, I travel a lot, and I see lodges at the pinnacle of their existence. They're organized for an event. They're all dressed to the nines. They have a well-planned event, and they're all being extremely brotherly and pats on the back. We did this. We're doing this. We have this event. We're excited to be here. And then the hard part for me is coming home and dealing with failure, dealing with the opposite of that, dealing with infighting, dealing with or witnessing infighting, or traveling to another lodge and seeing stuff that isn't bright and shiny Masonry, and learning how to deal with failure, because we're all going to fail in our lodges at some point. We're all going to put a lot of effort into something, and it's just not going to work. And it can be really, really hard. And I'm speaking from a lot of experience. So I can't wait to touch upon all the other things too, but I look forward to talking about how to, as Brian was saying, how to attack positivity and negativity in your lodge, because both of them can be time consuming and derailing at the same time. A highly positive and good performing lodge, like Brian said, what do you do to the guys who are coming up in the line who are just like, oh, this is how it is. I don't have to put any work into this because it already is. Or coming into a lodge that's extremely negative and saying, do I want to be here anymore? Because I can't fix this. I mean, I know people and myself, I've been in both of those shoes. And I think that's a topic of conversation that I haven't heard before on a Masonic podcast, because it's a difficult question, and I'm looking forward to getting into that. And it's going to be hard for me. I'm probably going to learn more than any of our viewers on it, all 6 of them, and Busby. So that being said, yeah, that's been our first hour. I'd like to thank everybody for watching and listening. We are going to schedule our next event once we hear a little feedback from everybody, I think, and see where we want to start off with. I am not the person who can sign us out. Who is that? So I really can't do anything else here except make noise.
All right. Well, we'll stop you there.